I'm Sarah Mitchell, and at 28 years old, I never imagined I would become the center of my family's greatest scandal. If you're watching this, please let me know where you're from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how my perfect family crumbled and how I found my revenge in the most unexpected way. This story has twists you won't see coming, and I promise, by the end, you'll understand why sometimes the best revenge is not just living well, but proving everyone wrong in the most spectacular way possible. Growing up in Pacific Heights, one of San Francisco's most exclusive neighborhoods, should have been paradise. Our Victorian mansion overlooked the Golden Gate Bridge, with its pristine gardens maintained by a team of gardeners, and imported marble floors that reflected old money elegance. The Mitchell family name opened doors throughout California. We were invited to every important social event. Our charitable donations were always acknowledged in the society pages, and business leaders sought my father's advice on investments. My father, Robert Mitchell, was one of the most renowned cardiac surgeons on the West Coast. His patient list read like a who's who of Silicon Valley executives, Hollywood celebrities, and political figures. He commanded fees that most people couldn't imagine, often flying to other states to perform life-saving surgeries that other doctors wouldn't attempt. My mother, Victoria Mitchell, came from railroad money. Her grandfather had built the Western Pacific lines that connected California to the rest of the country. She spent her days organizing charity galas for causes like children's hospitals and arts education, events that regularly raised millions of dollars and cemented our family's position in San Francisco's social hierarchy. But the real source of our wealth came from my grandfather, William Mitchell. Grandpa William was a legend in shipping circles, a man who had inherited a small family trucking business in the 1960s and transformed it into Mitchell Maritime, one of the largest logistics empires on the West Coast. Starting with a handful of delivery trucks, he had expanded into shipping containers, then acquired small ports, and eventually controlled shipping routes from Seattle to San Diego. By the time I was born, Mitchell Maritime employed over 10,000 people and generated revenues in the hundreds of millions annually. The company's success had made our family incredibly wealthy, but more than that, it had given us influence and respect throughout the business community. Politicians courted my grandfather's endorsement, environmental groups negotiated with him on shipping regulations, and business schools invited him to lecture on entrepreneurship and strategic growth. From my earliest memories, I knew I was different from the rest of my family. During dinner conversations about quarterly earnings reports and acquisition strategies, I would be mentally composing stories or thinking about the books I was reading. While my parents discussed which stocks to buy or which charity events to attend, I was fascinated by the human stories behind the headlines. Who were the workers affected by corporate mergers? What were the real-life impacts of the policies they discussed so casually? My sister Jessica, 3 years older than me, was everything my parents wanted in a daughter. She had inherited my father's analytical mind and my mother's social grace, combined with my grandfather's instinct for business. By the time she was 12, she could explain maritime shipping regulations and understand profit margin calculations. She spoke confidently at dinner about market trends and international trade policies, impressing our parents and grandfather with her precociousness. Jessica followed the golden path mapped out for her with mathematical precision. She attended the prestigious Catherine Del Marburg School, where she was valedictorian, then Stanford University for economics with a minor in international business. Her undergraduate thesis on Pacific Rim trade relationships was so impressive that it was published in a respected business journal. She followed this with Harvard Business School, where she graduated in the top 5% of her class and was recruited by 3 Fortune 500 companies. Instead of accepting these outside offers, Jessica joined Mitchell Maritime at 24 as Director of Strategic Planning, a position created specifically for her. Within 2 years, she had identified 3 new shipping routes that increased company profits by 18%. By 28, she was being groomed to take over as CEO when Grandpa William eventually retired. Her personal life was equally perfect by our family's standards. She married Connor Walsh, whose family owned the largest container shipping operation in the Pacific Northwest. Their wedding was featured on the cover of San Francisco Magazine and attended by senators, tech moguls, and entertainment industry leaders. They bought a mansion in Presidio Heights and a vacation home in Napa Valley, becoming the young power couple that society columnists loved to photograph at charity events. Meanwhile, I struggled to find my place in a family that valued financial success above all else. I performed well academically, but my interests consistently diverged from my family's expectations. When I joined the school newspaper instead of the investment club, my parents exchanged worried glances. When I spent my summer vacation volunteering at a literacy program instead of interning at a financial firm, they sat me down for serious conversations about my future. "You need to think practically about your career, Sarah," my father would say. "Writing is a nice hobby, but it won't support the lifestyle you're accustomed to. Look at Jessica," my mother would add. "She's building something substantial, something that will provide security and respect for her entire life." The pressure intensified during my senior year of high school when college applications were due. I wanted to study creative writing and journalism, but my parents pushed relentlessly for business or pre-med programs. When I secretly applied to UC Berkeley's English literature program and was accepted, the explosion at home was nuclear. "Absolutely not," my father declared when I told them about my acceptance. "I will not pay for you to waste 4 years studying something that leads nowhere." "We have a reputation to maintain," my mother added. "What will people think when they hear that William Mitchell's granddaughter is studying literature instead of something substantial?" Despite their threats to cut off financial support, I enrolled at Berkeley, funding my education through a combination of scholarships, student loans, and part-time jobs. My parents eventually agreed to pay a portion of my tuition, but only after extracting promises that I would double major in business and come to my senses about my career goals. The only family member who supported my choice was Grandpa William. Without telling my parents, he would slip me checks to help with living expenses, textbooks, and the supplies I needed for my writing. During our weekly phone calls, he would ask about my classes, my writing projects, and my plans for the future. "Follow your passion, Sarah," he would tell me. "I built this company from nothing by following my instincts. Money without purpose is just numbers on a page." These conversations with my grandfather were the bright spots in what were often difficult college years. I loved my literature classes and flourished in the campus literary magazine, but I was constantly battling my family's disappointment and my own financial stress. While Jessica lived comfortably in her Stanford dorm and spent spring breaks skiing in Aspen, I worked 20 hours a week at a campus cafe and spent vacations in my tiny apartment, unable to afford trips home. After graduation, the contrast between Jessica's trajectory and mine became even starker. She moved seamlessly into her position at Mitchell Maritime, complete with a generous starting salary, company car, and clear path to executive leadership. I, meanwhile, struggled to break into journalism, taking freelance assignments that paid barely enough to cover rent on a studio apartment in Oakland. My parents saw my career struggles as validation of their warnings about impractical life choices. Every family gathering became an opportunity to highlight the disparity between Jessica's success and my difficulties. Jessica just negotiated the largest shipping contract in company history, my mother would announce at Thanksgiving dinner. $45 million in annual revenue. The Maritime Association is giving her their Young Executive Award. Then she would turn to me with that practiced smile that never reached her eyes. "And how is your freelance writing going, Sarah? Are you still working for those little online magazines?" The dismissive tone in her voice made my achievements feel insignificant, even though I was proud of the investigative pieces I was publishing about housing inequality and environmental justice. When one of my articles about corporate pollution was picked up by a national magazine, earning me my first substantial paycheck, my father's response was crushing. $2,000 for a month's work? Jessica makes that in a day. What hurt most was that they never read my work. Not once did they ask to see an article I had published or show interest in the stories I was telling. When I won a regional journalism award for a series on homeless veterans, they didn't attend the ceremony. "We had the Hendersons' anniversary party," my mother explained. You understand that some social obligations are more important than others. Only Grandpa William celebrated my small victories. He not only read every article I published, but kept physical copies in a scrapbook in his study. He would call me after each piece was published to discuss the research I had done, the interviews I had conducted, and the impact I hoped to achieve. You have a gift for finding the human story, he told me after reading my piece about a family losing their home to predatory lending. Don't let anyone convince you that what you do doesn't matter. Good journalism changes the world one story at a time. During these difficult early career years, one person besides my grandfather seemed to truly see and understand me, Mrs. Eleanor Chin, who had worked for our family for over 30 years. Eleanor had started as my grandmother's companion and continued as my grandfather's housekeeper and trusted friend after grandmother Elizabeth passed away when I was 5. Eleanor was different from the other household staff. She had a master's degree in literature from Beijing University and had been a teacher before immigrating to the United States. She spoke 5 languages fluently and had an extensive knowledge of world literature that rivaled any professor I had encountered. My grandfather valued her insights on everything from business decisions to family matters. What I didn't know during my childhood was that Eleanor had been quietly documenting everything she witnessed in our family dynamics. She kept detailed journals of conversations, interactions, and incidents that revealed the true nature of relationships within our household. Her position as an employee who was essentially invisible to my parents during their private moments gave her unique access to their real thoughts and motivations. Your grandfather asked me to pay attention, Eleanor told me years later. He sensed that something wasn't right about how your parents treated you compared to Jessica. He wanted documentation in case he ever needed proof. Eleanor also revealed that my grandmother Elizabeth had been a poet before marrying into the Mitchell family. She had published 2 small collections of verse in the 1960s and had dreams of becoming a serious literary figure. But after marriage, family and social expectations had gradually consumed her creative ambitions. Your grandmother saw herself in you, Eleanor explained. She made your grandfather promise that if any of their descendants showed artistic talent, he would support them fully. She didn't want her own lost dreams to be repeated in the next generation. This revelation helped me understand why my grandfather had always been different in his treatment of my creative interests. He wasn't just being indulgent. He was honoring a promise to the wife he had loved deeply and lost too soon. As I entered my mid-20s, my family's treatment of me became increasingly cold and dismissive. Jessica's success at Mitchell Maritime had made her the undisputed heir apparent, while my career as a freelance journalist was viewed as an extended phase of irresponsibility that I would eventually outgrow. The situation deteriorated further when I began investigating corporate malfeasance for a series of articles about environmental violations by shipping companies. When I asked Jessica for background information about industry practices, she accused me of planning to attack Mitchell Maritime in print. "You're so naive, Sarah," she said during a tense conversation at a family barbecue. "You think you're this righteous crusader, but you don't understand how business really works. These environmental regulations you write about so passionately, they cost jobs and hurt working families." "And pollution doesn't hurt families?" I countered. "The communities living near shipping ports have cancer rates that are through the roof." Jessica rolled her eyes. "Everything is so black and white with you. Grow up and learn how the real world works." This conversation, overheard by my parents, led to a confrontation that further solidified my position as the family disappointment. My father accused me of planning to bite the hand that feeds you by investigating the shipping industry. My mother suggested that perhaps I should consider changing my focus to more positive stories that wouldn't create conflicts of interest. When I refused to abandon my journalistic integrity, they began excluding me from family business discussions entirely. Sunday dinners became exercises in isolation, with Jessica, Connor, and my parents discussing company strategy while I sat silent, clearly unwelcome in conversations about our family's primary source of income. The final straw came when I published an article about labor violations at a shipping facility owned by one of Mitchell Maritime's competitors. Even though the article had nothing to do with our family company, my parents treated it as a personal attack on their livelihood. "This is what we get for supporting your writing career," my father said coldly. "You use your platform to attack the very industry that provides your comfortable lifestyle." "I don't live comfortably," I protested. "I can barely afford my rent, and I haven't asked you for money since college." "Maybe if you wrote about positive business stories instead of constantly looking for scandal," my mother suggested, "you would be more successful." That conversation marked the beginning of what would become nearly 2 years of minimal contact with my family. They stopped inviting me to casual gatherings, only including me in major holidays and formal events where my absence would be noticed by extended family and friends. When Grandpa William was diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's at 85, the family dynamics shifted dramatically. My parents immediately took charge of his medical care, finding the best specialists and arranging for him to move to an exclusive memory care facility in Marin County. "It's for his own safety," my mother explained when I questioned why he couldn't remain in his beloved home with proper care. "The doctors say he needs specialized attention that we can't provide." Initially, family visits to Grandpa were coordinated but equal. Jessica and I would both visit weekly, often on different days to avoid overwhelming him. But as his condition progressed, I noticed that my access became increasingly restricted. "He gets confused when too many people visit," my father explained when I complained about canceled visits. "The medical team recommends limiting his interactions to immediate family members who are involved in business matters that might come up in conversation." What I later learned was that during this period, my parents were systematically manipulating Grandpa's perception of me during his more lucid moments. They would visit with Jessica, bringing business documents for him to review and sign while his mental capacity was clearest. During these visits, they would plant seeds of doubt about my motivations and character. Eleanor, who was allowed to visit because of her long-time relationship with Grandpa, eventually told me what she witnessed during this period. They would wait until his confusion was strongest, she revealed years later, tears in her eyes. Then they would tell him stories about you asking for money, complaining about your inheritance, planning to contest his will. Your grandfather loved you, but the disease made him vulnerable to their lies. The manipulation was sophisticated and cruel. My parents created fake documentation, phone bills they claimed I had asked them to pay, legal consultations they said I had requested about inheritance law. Even fabricated emails supposedly from me expressing resentment about family wealth distribution. They would show him these documents during his confused periods, Eleanor continued, then discuss them during his lucid moments as if they were established facts. Gradually, they convinced him that you were ungrateful and financially irresponsible. Meanwhile, Jessica's visits were carefully choreographed to reinforce her image as the responsible, deserving heir. She would bring business reports, discuss company strategy, and present herself as the natural successor to the family legacy. Her conversations with Grandpa during this period were recorded by my parents as evidence of his wishes regarding company succession. As Grandpa's condition worsened, my parents imposed increasingly strict limitations on my visits. Phone calls were monitored, and I was told that hearing my voice sometimes agitated him because he was confused about family dynamics. "It's better if you communicate through us for now," my mother suggested. "We can pass along your messages and let you know how he's doing." This isolation was devastating. Grandpa William had been my closest family relationship, the one person who had consistently supported my dreams and valued my perspectives. Watching him slip away while being denied meaningful contact felt like losing him twice, once to the disease and once to my family's manipulation. During the rare visits I was allowed, I noticed disturbing changes in how Grandpa responded to me. The warm affection that had characterized our relationship was replaced by a wary distance. He would look at me with confusion and sometimes what appeared to be disappointment. "You're Sarah, right?" he asked during one particularly heartbreaking visit. "The one who's been having money troubles?" I tried to explain that I was managing fine financially, that I had never asked for loans or complained about my situation, but my words seemed to bounce off him. Someone had clearly prepared him to expect financial requests from me, and my denials only seemed to confirm his suspicions that I was being dishonest. Eleanor later told me that after my visits, my parents would have private conversations with Grandpa where they would interpret my behavior in the worst possible light. Sarah seemed agitated today, they would say. She kept denying that she's struggling financially, but we know she's been having problems. The denial is concerning. What none of us knew at the time was that Grandpa William was more aware of the manipulation than anyone realized. Despite his memory issues, he retained enough clarity during certain periods to recognize inconsistencies in the stories he was being told about me. Eleanor revealed that about 18 months before his death, Grandpa began asking her to document conversations and interactions. Something's not right, he told her during one of her visits. The Sarah they're describing isn't the granddaughter I know. I need you to help me figure out what's really happening. Working together, Eleanor and Grandpa developed a system for recording conversations and documenting incidents. Eleanor would take detailed notes immediately after witnessing family interactions, and Grandpa would dictate his own observations during his clearer moments. He was particularly sharp in the early mornings, Eleanor explained. The medication schedule left him with a window of about 2 hours each day when his thinking was remarkably clear. That's when he would review what had happened the previous day and make his real decisions about family matters. During these lucid periods, Grandpa also began meeting secretly with his attorney, Harrison Blackwood, to discuss his concerns about family manipulation and his real wishes for his estate. These meetings were carefully scheduled when my parents believed he was napping or receiving medical treatments. He was extremely strategic about timing, Blackwood later told me. He knew his window of mental clarity was limited, so he used it efficiently to protect his true intentions. 6 months before his death, my parents convinced Grandpa to update his will during what they claimed was a period of mental clarity, but what Eleanor documented as one of his most confused phases. This will, heavily influenced by their coaching, left the majority of the estate to Jessica, while giving me only a token inheritance and a letter expressing disappointment in my life choices. They rehearsed the conversation with him for weeks, Eleanor revealed. They would visit during his confused periods and practice the same talking points over and over until he began repeating their words as if they were his own thoughts. The will signing was attended by my parents and Jessica, with carefully selected witnesses who were business associates grateful to my family for various favors. None of them questioned Grandpa's mental state or the unusual circumstances of the will creation. But what they didn't know was that 3 days after this will signing, during one of his clearest periods, Grandpa met secretly with Harrison Blackwood and Eleanor to create his actual final will. This document was witnessed by Dr. Patricia Williams, his neurologist, and recorded on video to document his mental competency. "I know what they're doing," he said in the video recording. "I may be sick, but I'm not stupid. They think because I'm confused sometimes that I don't see their game. But I see everything, and I'm going to make sure Sarah gets what she deserves." The call came on a rainy Tuesday morning in November. I was in my Oakland apartment, working on an article about housing discrimination, when my phone rang. My father's voice was formal and distant. "Your grandfather passed away peacefully in his sleep last night. The funeral will be Friday. We expect you there Thursday evening for the family dinner." Despite expecting this news for months, it felt like a physical blow. I sat on my secondhand couch, tears streaming down my face, mourning not just the loss of my grandfather, but the loss of the only family member who had truly understood and accepted me. I maxed out my credit card to buy appropriate funeral attire and took time off from freelance assignments I couldn't afford to lose. When I arrived at my parents' house Thursday evening, the contrast between my life and theirs had never felt more stark. I pulled up in my 10-year-old Honda Civic, watching as Connor helped Jessica out of their new Tesla Model S. Dinner that night was tense and formal. My parents and Jessica discussed funeral arrangements they had made without my input, despite my close relationship with Grandpa. Connor talked about the business implications of Grandpa's death, while I sat largely silent, processing my grief. Several times during the meal, I noticed meaningful glances exchanged between my parents and Jessica when certain topics arose, particularly anything related to Grandpa's estate or the company's future leadership. After dinner, I overheard a fragment of conversation between my parents in the kitchen as I was helping clear dishes. Harrison called again about the will reading protocols, my father said in a low voice. William left very specific instructions about how it should be conducted. Well, we knew this might be complicated, my mother replied. But everything is arranged as we discussed. There shouldn't be any surprises. They noticed me then and quickly changed the subject to funeral flower arrangements, but their words left me with an uneasy feeling I couldn't shake. The funeral was held at Grace Cathedral, packed with business leaders, politicians, and society figures who had known and respected Grandpa William. I sat between my parents in the front row, fighting back tears as speaker after speaker praised his business acumen, his charitable contributions, and his role in developing West Coast shipping infrastructure. Not one person mentioned his love of mystery novels, his passion for jazz music, or his gentle way with stray cats that he would secretly feed in the garden. These personal details that had made him special to me seemed to have been erased from his public legacy. After the burial at Cypress Lawn Cemetery, Harrison Blackwood approached our family. He was a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes that reminded me of my grandfather. He had been Grandpa's attorney for over 20 years and had always treated me with warmth during the few times we had met. The will reading will take place tomorrow at 10 a.m. in William's home office, he informed us formally. He left very specific instructions about how the proceeding should be conducted, including the order in which information should be presented. My father's jaw tightened slightly. Specific instructions? That seems unnecessarily complicated. Your father was very thorough in his final planning, Blackwood replied diplomatically. I'm simply following his explicit wishes as outlined in his instructions to me. That evening, back at my parents' house, Jessica made sure to corner me in the hallway outside my childhood bedroom, which had long since been converted into a home office. I hope you're not expecting too much from tomorrow, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Grandpa was very clear about wanting the company legacy preserved by someone who understands business realities. I was too emotionally exhausted to rise to her bait. I just want to honor his memory, Jessica. She patted my arm condescendingly. Of course you do. Just remember that some of us have been working for years to deserve our place in the family legacy, not just showing up when it's convenient. Her words stung particularly because they were so unfair. During Grandpa's illness, I had visited as often as I was allowed, despite the financial strain of frequent trips from Oakland to Marin County. But I was too tired to argue with her twisted version of reality. The next morning, we assembled in Grandpa William's home office for what I expected to be a brief, formal proceeding. The room was exactly as I remembered from childhood visits, walls lined with maritime histories and business biographies, his massive oak desk commanding one end of the space, and comfortable leather chairs arranged for family meetings. Harrison Blackwood sat behind the desk, organizing multiple sets of documents with methodical precision. My parents occupied the central chairs, with Jessica and Connor to their right. I sat to my mother's left, feeling small and insignificant in my simple black dress. Eleanor was also present, sitting quietly in a chair near the window. Her presence surprised me, as household staff typically weren't included in family legal proceedings. Thank you all for gathering, Blackwood began formally. William left very detailed instructions for how this reading should be conducted. I will follow his wishes exactly, regardless of any objections or interruptions. He began with standard legal language, then moved to smaller bequests. Donations to maritime museums, gifts to longtime employees, a substantial sum to Eleanor for 3 decades of faithful service. To my granddaughter, Jessica Mitchell Walsh, Blackwood read, I leave my personal collection of maritime artifacts and the sum of $2 million, with the expectation that she will continue to honor the family's connection to the shipping industry. Jessica's smile faltered slightly. $2 million was substantial, but far less than she had expected for someone being groomed to inherit the company. To my granddaughter, Sarah Mitchell, Blackwood continued, and my heart began racing. I leave this message. You have disappointed me with your constant requests for money and your lack of appreciation for family sacrifices. Perhaps a modest inheritance will teach you the value of hard work. The room went silent. I felt like All the oxygen had been sucked out of the space. After the message came the crushing revelation. Therefore, I leave Sarah the sum of $50,000 and my collection of books, hoping she will finally learn responsibility. $50,000. After Jessica received $2 million, plus presumably the company shares that hadn't been mentioned yet. The humiliation was complete. But then, Blackwood did something unexpected. Instead of continuing with the company inheritance portion, he set down the document he had been reading and picked up a different set of papers. However, he said, his voice taking on a different tone, that was not William Mitchell's actual final will. My father shot to his feet. What do you mean? I was present when my father dictated those wishes. Blackwood's expression hardened. Mr. Mitchell, you were present when your father, during a period of compromised mental capacity, repeated words that had been suggested to him repeatedly during his confused states. What I just read was a document created through systematic manipulation of an elderly man suffering from dementia. He held up the new set of papers. This is William Mitchell's true final will and testament, created during a period of documented mental clarity, with proper witnesses and video documentation of his competency. Eleanor stood up from her chair, no longer the silent household employee. I have 30 years of documentation about this family's dynamics, she said firmly. William asked me to witness his true final wishes and to ensure they were carried out exactly as he intended. Blackwood nodded to Eleanor, then turned back to us. Before I read the actual will, William left instructions for me to share recordings that document the manipulation he endured during his illness. What happened next was the most devastating hour of my life, but also the most vindicating. Blackwood had brought a digital recorder, and he began playing conversations that had been secretly recorded in Grandpa's memory care facility. The first recording was my parents' voices, clear and unmistakable. Dad, we need to talk about Sarah again. She called asking about money for her car repairs. That's the third time this month. I never called about car repairs, I whispered, but Blackwood held up a hand for silence. Grandpa's voice on the recording was weak and confused. Sarah needs money? But I thought she was doing well with her writing. She tells everyone she's successful. Jessica's voice joined the conversation, but she's constantly asking us for help. She's embarrassed to ask you directly, so she goes through us. The lies continued for 20 minutes of recording. My family systematically convinced my confused grandfather that I was financially irresponsible, ungrateful, and manipulative. They fabricated phone calls, created fake bills, and even claimed I had criticized his parenting of my father to mutual friends. But the most damaging recording came next. It was my parents talking to each other, apparently unaware that the room's recording system was active. The old man is getting more confused, my father's voice said. This is our chance to ensure Sarah doesn't get anything substantial. She's always been the weak link, my mother replied. Thank God Jessica turned out properly. At least we'll have one daughter who can maintain the family legacy. Once he's gone, my father continued, we need to make sure Sarah understands her place. She's gotten too comfortable thinking her writing career matters. Recording after recording revealed the depth of their manipulation, their genuine disdain for my life choices, and their systematic efforts to turn my grandfather against me. But what broke my heart most was hearing Grandpa's voice in later recordings, weak and confused, but still defending me. But Sarah writes such beautiful stories, he said in one recording. She sent me that article about the homeless veterans. It made me cry. Dad, my father's voice replied patiently, Sarah didn't write that article. She just forwarded it to you and claimed credit. We've talked about this before. The lies were so comprehensive, so carefully constructed, that they had created an alternate reality in my grandfather's declining mind. When the recordings ended, my family sat in stunned silence. My mother was sobbing quietly, her carefully applied makeup streaked down her face. My father looked like he had aged 10 years. Jessica was staring at her hands, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Now, Blackwood said quietly, I will read William Mitchell's actual final will and testament. He began with the company shares. To my granddaughter, Jessica Mitchell Walsh, who has demonstrated business competence but lacks the moral character necessary to lead a family enterprise with integrity, I leave 5% of Mitchell Maritime shares and the Napa Valley property. Jessica's face went white. 5% was worth millions, but it was nowhere near controlling interest. To my granddaughter, Sarah Mitchell, who has been subjected to systematic emotional abuse and manipulation by family members who should have protected her, I leave 60% of Mitchell Maritime shares, making her the controlling owner of the company. The silence was deafening. Then chaos erupted. "This is impossible," my father shouted. "Sarah knows nothing about running a business." Additionally, Blackwood continued over the shouting. I leave Sarah the family estate, my personal investment portfolio valued at $35 million, and a trust fund of $10 million to support her transition into business leadership. My mother had stopped crying and was now staring at me with undisguised rage. "This is exactly what we were afraid of," she hissed. "You manipulated a sick old man to steal what belongs to your sister." Actually, Eleanor interjected, speaking with quiet authority. "I have documented every interaction Sarah had with William during his illness. She never once asked for money, never discussed inheritance, and never showed anything but genuine love and concern for his well-being." Blackwood reached into his briefcase and pulled out a leather-bound journal. William also kept his own record during his lucid periods. This journal documents his true feelings about each family member and his reasons for his inheritance decisions. He opened to a marked page and read, "They think I don't understand what they're doing, but I see clearly during my good moments. Sarah is the only one who visits without an agenda, who talks to me about books and ideas rather than business. She's the one who inherited Elizabeth's creative spirit, and she deserves the chance to build something meaningful with the foundation I'm leaving her." As Blackwood continued reading from the journal, an even more disturbing picture emerged. My parents' manipulation hadn't begun with Grandpa's illness. It had been going on for years. They had been intercepting his attempts to support my writing career, returning checks he had sent me and telling him I was too proud to accept help. "He sent you graduation money 5 times over the years," Eleanor revealed. "Your parents returned every check and told him you were insulted by the gesture. He thought you had rejected his support." The journal entries revealed Grandpa's growing awareness of the manipulation, tried to send Sarah money for her apartment deposit. Robert returned the check and said she was embarrassed to need help from family. "But Eleanor tells me Sarah is working 3 jobs to make ends meet. Someone is lying to me." Later entries showed his growing determination to protect me. "If they're willing to lie about Sarah now, what will they do when I'm gone? I need to ensure she has security and opportunity, regardless of what they try to do." But Blackwood wasn't finished. The next revelation was even more shocking. Jessica had been embezzling from Mitchell Maritime for 3 years, skimming small amounts from various accounts to fund her lifestyle beyond even her generous salary. William discovered this during a routine audit he requested, Blackwood explained. He had been monitoring company finances more closely as he prepared for succession planning. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, expense reports, and transaction logs that showed Jessica had stolen over $400,000 from the company. She had been using corporate accounts to pay for personal vacations, designer clothing, and even part of her wedding expenses. "I was going to announce my findings after the will reading," Blackwood continued, "but William asked me to include this information in his inheritance decisions. He felt that someone who would steal from the family business could not be trusted with its leadership." Connor, who had been silent throughout the proceedings, suddenly stood up. "Jessica, is this true?" Jessica finally found her voice, but it was weak and shaky. "I was going to pay it back. It was just temporary borrowing." "Temporary borrowing?" Connor's voice rose. "For $100,000? The company makes millions." Jessica protested. "It wasn't even noticeable." "It was noticeable enough that William found it," Blackwood said dryly. The final bombshell came when Blackwood revealed the last portion of Grandpa's documentation. During his illness, my parents had not only manipulated him about my character, but had actively worked to sabotage my writing career. William discovered that Robert and Victoria had been contacting publications where Sarah submitted work, Blackwood explained. They would call editors and publishers, identifying themselves as concerned family members, and suggest that Sarah was unstable and unreliable. The journal entries from this period were heartbreaking. Found out today that Robert has been sabotaging Sarah's career for 2 years. Called her editor at Bay Area Weekly and told them she had family issues and couldn't be trusted with deadlines. No wonder she's been struggling to get consistent work. My own son has been destroying his daughter's chances at success while pretending to be disappointed in her failures. Another entry read, Victoria contacted the literary magazine that was considering Sarah's short story collection, told them the family was concerned about Sarah's mental stability, and suggested they might face legal issues if they published her work. The cruelty is breathtaking. As these revelations unfolded, I felt a strange mixture of devastation and vindication. Everything I had struggled with, the rejections that seemed too harsh, the promising opportunities that mysteriously evaporated, the editors who suddenly became cold after initial enthusiasm, it had all been orchestrated by my own family. There's more, Blackwood continued, his voice heavy with sadness. William also discovered that your parents had been monitoring your email and social media accounts, gathering information they could use against you in their conversations with him. After revealing the extent of my family's betrayal, Blackwood proceeded to read the complete terms of my actual inheritance. Beyond the controlling shares of Mitchell Maritime and the monetary bequests, Grandpa had left me something even more valuable, a detailed plan for transforming the company and a network of trusted advisors to help me succeed. William arranged for a board of experienced executives to assist with your transition into leadership, Blackwood explained. These individuals have been secretly monitoring the company's operations and are prepared to help you implement immediate changes to address the financial irregularities they've discovered. It turned out that Jessica's embezzlement was just the tip of the iceberg. Under my parents' guidance, the company had been engaging in questionable accounting practices, overcharging clients, and cutting corners on safety regulations to maximize profits. My grandfather had been investigating these issues before his illness progressed. He wanted you to have the resources and support necessary to clean house, Blackwood said. William believed that your moral compass and investigative skills would serve the company better than traditional business experience. The inheritance also included detailed evidence of my family's manipulation, professionally documented and legally verified. Every intercepted letter, every sabotaged opportunity, every lie they had told was meticulously recorded. Your grandfather wanted you to have the choice, Blackwood explained. You can use this evidence to pursue legal action for the damage done to your career and emotional well-being, or you can simply move forward with the knowledge of what really happened. My family's reaction was swift and vicious. My father immediately threatened to contest the will, claiming Grandpa had been manipulated by Eleanor and Blackwood. My mother accused me of orchestrating an elaborate con game to steal the family fortune. Jessica oscillated between tearful pleas about unfairness and furious accusations about my supposed manipulation of a sick old man. This is a joke, Jessica screamed. Sarah couldn't run a lemonade stand, much less a multinational corporation. Grandpa was clearly not thinking straight when he made these arrangements. Actually, Eleanor spoke up, her voice calm but firm. I have video recordings of William making these decisions during his clearest periods, with his neurologist present to verify his mental competency. He was more aware of what was happening than any of you realized. The existence of video evidence seemed to deflate my parents' immediate protests, but my father wasn't finished. Even if this will is legally valid, Sarah will destroy everything our family has built. She has no experience, no business training, no understanding of the shipping industry. She has something more valuable than experience, Eleanor replied. She has integrity. William watched Jessica embezzle from the company for 3 years while you and Victoria ignored the signs because she was making you money. He decided that moral character was more important than an MBA. Over the following weeks, my family launched a comprehensive legal assault on Grandpa's will. They hired 3 different law firms, claiming everything from undue influence to forged documents. The battle consumed thousands of dollars in legal fees and created a media circus that dominated San Francisco society gossip for months. But Grandpa's planning proved to be ironclad. The video documentation of his mental competency, Eleanor's detailed records, and the testimony of multiple medical professionals created an unshakable foundation for the will's validity. During depositions, even more damaging information emerged. Jessica was forced to admit to the embezzlement. My parents had to acknowledge their career sabotage, and Connor revealed that he had known about the manipulation scheme, but had remained silent to protect his own interests. The legal proceedings also revealed the full extent of my family's financial misconduct at Mitchell Maritime. Federal investigators, alerted by information in Grandpa's records, launched their own inquiry into the company's practices. This investigation ultimately resulted in substantial fines and the requirement for independent oversight of operations. 6 months after the will reading, my family's attorneys advised them to drop their challenge. The evidence against them was overwhelming, and continuing the fight would only result in more public embarrassment and legal expenses. My first day as the controlling owner of Mitchell Maritime was surreal. I walked into the downtown San Francisco headquarters wearing a simple business suit I had bought with money from my inheritance, carrying a briefcase full of my grandfather's documentation about necessary company reforms. The board meeting where I officially took control was attended by the executive team that had been working under Jessica's leadership. Many of them had no idea about the family drama or the circumstances of my inheritance. They simply knew that William Mitchell's granddaughter was now their boss. I know many of you are surprised by this transition. I addressed the room of veteran shipping executives. I also know that my background is unconventional for this industry, but I'm here to learn, to implement the reforms my grandfather planned, and to build a company culture based on integrity rather than just profit maximization. My first major decision was to hire an independent accounting firm to conduct a comprehensive audit of company finances. The results were sobering. Beyond Jessica's embezzlement, there were years of questionable practices that had inflated profits while exposing the company to significant legal risks. I also implemented new safety protocols, increased worker compensation, and established an environmental compliance department to address the ecological concerns that had always troubled me about the shipping industry. The most challenging aspect of my new role wasn't learning the business. It was overcoming years of self-doubt that my family had instilled in me. During my first month as company owner, I would wake up every morning wondering if I was truly capable of managing such a large enterprise. Imposter syndrome is normal, Dr. Sarah Kellerman, the business psychologist Grandpa had arranged for me to work with, explained during our sessions. Your family spent years convincing you that you were incompetent. It will take time to rebuild your self-confidence. Through therapy and the support of the experienced executives Grandpa had chosen, I gradually developed the skills and confidence necessary for business leadership. I discovered that my investigative journalism background had given me valuable abilities. I could analyze complex situations, ask probing questions, and identify problems that others missed. Within 6 months, Mitchell Maritime's efficiency had improved significantly, employee satisfaction had increased, and we had avoided 3 potential legal disasters by proactively addressing safety and environmental concerns. Once I had stabilized the company and proven my competence, I began implementing the more personal aspects of my grandfather's plan. The evidence he had gathered about my family's manipulation was sufficient to pursue several different types of legal action. I started with Jessica's embezzlement. Rather than simply firing her, I filed criminal charges and pursued civil action to recover the stolen funds with interest and penalties. The legal proceedings were covered extensively in the business press, destroying her reputation in the shipping industry. Jessica Mitchell Walsh, former executive at Mitchell Maritime, was sentenced today to 2 years of probation and ordered to pay $800,000 in restitution for embezzlement charges, the San Francisco Chronicle reported. The case highlights growing concerns about oversight in family-controlled businesses. For my parents, I chose a more subtle but equally devastating approach. I used company resources to conduct a thorough investigation of my father's medical practice, discovering that he had been engaging in insurance fraud by billing for procedures that weren't medically necessary. The evidence was turned over to medical licensing boards and insurance companies. While criminal charges weren't filed, my father faced professional sanctions that effectively ended his career as a high-profile surgeon. His patient base evaporated as word spread about the investigation. My mother's charity work became impossible to continue when I revealed her financial improprieties. She had been using her position on various charity boards to funnel donations to organizations that provided kickbacks to family members. When this information became public, she was forced to resign from every board position she held. The most satisfying aspect of my revenge was watching my family's social standing crumble. The society pages that had once celebrated their achievements now chronicled their downfall. Invitations to exclusive events dried up, longtime friends distanced themselves, and the country clubs they had belonged to for decades began pressuring them to resign their memberships. Former San Francisco Power family faces multiple investigations, read one particularly brutal society column. The Mitchells, once synonymous with success and philanthropy, are now dealing with criminal charges, professional sanctions, and social ostracism following revelations about their treatment of family patriarch William Mitchell during his final illness. I made sure to attend every social event I had previously been excluded from, now as one of the city's most successful young business leaders. Watching my parents and Jessica try to navigate these gatherings while whispers followed them around was deeply satisfying. At one charity auction where I was a major sponsor, I purchased a piece of jewelry that my mother had donated, probably to raise money for their legal fees. When the auctioneer announced my winning bid, I caught my mother's eye across the room and smiled. She looked away quickly, her face burning with humiliation. Beyond the personal satisfaction of revenge, Mitchell Maritime flourished under my leadership. By implementing ethical business practices and investing in employee welfare, the company's reputation improved dramatically. We attracted new clients who valued our commitment to environmental responsibility and worker safety. Within 3 years, annual revenues had increased by 40%, and employee turnover had dropped to the lowest levels in company history. Industry publications featured our transformation as a case study in how principled leadership could drive both moral and financial success. I also expanded the company into new areas that aligned with my values. We invested in renewable energy shipping solutions, partnered with environmental organizations to reduce our carbon footprint, and established programs to provide maritime training for underserved communities. My writing career was reborn as well. I published a series of articles about corporate family dynamics and workplace ethics that attracted national attention. A book deal followed, and Blood and Business, A Family's Journey from Betrayal to Redemption, became a bestseller that was translated into 12 languages. Using part of my inheritance, I established the Elizabeth Mitchell Foundation for Emerging Writers, named after my grandmother. The foundation provided grants, mentorship, and publishing opportunities for writers from disadvantaged backgrounds or those facing family opposition to their artistic pursuits. Every young writer deserves the chance to develop their voice without fear of family sabotage, I announced at the foundation's launch event. No one should have to choose between family approval and artistic integrity. The foundation's first grant recipient was a young woman whose family had cut off financial support when she chose creative writing over pre-med studies. Her story echoed my own experience so closely that I saw myself in her determination and vulnerability. "You saved my life," she told me at the foundation's annual gala 2 years later. I was ready to give up writing and go back to my family's plan for me. This grant gave me the confidence to keep going. About 4 years after the will reading, my parents began reaching out about reconciliation. Their legal troubles had been resolved through plea agreements and settlements, but their finances were severely constrained, and their social standing remained damaged. "Sarah," my mother said during an awkward phone call, "we've been doing a lot of thinking about what happened. Perhaps we could meet and discuss moving forward as a family. What exactly are you proposing?" I asked, having learned to be direct in all family communications. "We made mistakes," she admitted, though her tone suggested the words were difficult for her to say. "The stress of your grandfather's illness affected our judgment. We'd like the chance to rebuild our relationship with you." I agreed to meet them for lunch at a neutral location, a restaurant downtown where we were unlikely to encounter anyone from our former social circle. The conversation was stilted and uncomfortable, with my parents clearly struggling to acknowledge their actions while hoping to benefit from my success. "We're proud of what you've accomplished with the company," my father said, his voice strained. "Perhaps there's a way we could contribute to the business again, help you leverage our experience and connections." I looked at him across the table, this man who had spent years undermining my confidence and sabotaging my career, now hoping to profit from the success I had built despite his interference. "I'm willing to work on rebuilding a personal relationship," I said carefully, "but there will never be a business relationship. You've proven that you can't be trusted with positions of authority or access to confidential information." The disappointment on their faces was obvious, but they accepted my terms. We began meeting occasionally for carefully structured family dinners with strict boundaries about topics of conversation and clear expectations about behavior. Jessica's descent was the most dramatic of all. After her criminal conviction for embezzlement, she struggled to find employment in the shipping industry. Her reputation was toxic, and her marriage to Connor ended in a bitter divorce when it was revealed that she had hidden her legal troubles from him until after their wedding. She eventually found work as a mid-level administrator at a small logistics company in Sacramento, making a fraction of her former salary and living in a modest apartment far from the luxury she had known. Her fall from grace was swift and complete. The most painful moment for her came when she applied for a position at one of Mitchell Maritime's subsidiary companies, apparently hoping that enough time had passed for her crimes to be overlooked. The application made its way to my desk for final approval. I scheduled a meeting with her, curious to see how she would handle the role reversal. She sat across from my desk in my grandfather's former office, wearing a cheap business suit and looking older than her 34 years. "I know this is awkward," she began, her voice lacking the confidence that had once defined her, "but I have 15 years of experience in the shipping industry. I could be valuable to the company." I studied her for a long moment, thinking about all the years she had treated me as inferior, all the times she had dismissed my dreams and mocked my struggles. "Jessica," I said finally, "you embezzled $400,000 from this company. You systematically lied to our grandfather during his illness. You helped our parents sabotage my career for years. Why should I trust you with any position of responsibility?" She started to cry then, real tears of desperation rather than the manipulative tears she had used so effectively in the past. "I need this job, Sarah. I have nothing left. Connor took everything in the divorce, and no one else will hire me." "You had everything," I replied, my voice steady but not unkind. "You had our parents' support, a clear path to inherit a fortune, and every advantage money could buy. You chose to throw it all away through greed and cruelty. I didn't hire her, but I also didn't take pleasure in her desperation. By then, my success had grown beyond the need for petty revenge. The most unexpected development in my journey was the expansion beyond shipping into media and publishing. Using profits from Mitchell Maritime and insights from my journalism background, I acquired several struggling publications and transformed them into profitable enterprises focused on investigative reporting and literary content. Mitchell Media became a major player in West Coast publishing within 5 years. We published groundbreaking investigations into corporate corruption, environmental crimes, and political misconduct. Our literary imprint discovered and promoted new voices, particularly writers from backgrounds similar to my own. The company's success attracted national attention. I was featured on magazine covers as one of America's most successful young entrepreneurs, invited to speak at business schools about ethical leadership, and appointed to several prestigious boards focused on media ethics and corporate responsibility. But the achievement I was most proud of was our investigative series on elder abuse in wealthy families. The reporting team I assembled uncovered dozens of cases similar to what had happened to my grandfather. Adult children manipulating aging parents to control inheritance decisions. "This series could have been written about your own family," one reviewer noted. "Sarah Mitchell has transformed personal tragedy into a powerful force for social change." The ultimate confrontation with my family came at a public event 5 years after Grandpa's death. I was being honored at the San Francisco Business Awards for Entrepreneur of the Year when I spotted my parents and Jessica in the audience. They had somehow obtained tickets, perhaps hoping that my success had made me willing to forgive and forget. During my acceptance speech, I spoke about my grandfather's influence on my values and leadership style. William Mitchell taught me that true success isn't measured only in profits, but in the positive impact you have on people's lives. He showed me that integrity is the foundation of all meaningful achievement. After the ceremony, my parents approached me during the reception. They looked older, worn down by years of reduced circumstances and social exclusion. "Sarah," my father said, his voice uncertain, "we wanted to congratulate you on your award. You've certainly proven us wrong about your business capabilities." I looked at them, the people who had shaped my childhood but had tried to destroy my adulthood. "Thank you," I said simply. "We've been hoping," my mother continued hesitantly, "that perhaps we could discuss rebuilding our family relationships. Life is short, and holding grudges doesn't benefit anyone." I considered their words carefully. Part of me wanted to reject them completely, to give them a taste of the exclusion I had experienced. But I had learned that true power lies not in perpetual revenge, but in the ability to choose grace when it serves your own peace of mind. "I'm open to that conversation," I said finally, "but it would require complete honesty about what happened, genuine remorse for the damage you caused, and respect for the boundaries I set going forward." They nodded eagerly, clearly hoping for financial reconciliation as much as emotional healing. "And just so we're clear," I added, my voice firm but not unkind, "this conversation is being recorded. I've learned the importance of documentation when it comes to family promises." The flash of recognition in their eyes told me they understood exactly what I was referencing. Today, 10 years after that devastating will reading, I run a media and shipping empire worth over $300 million. Mitchell Maritime has become an industry leader in sustainable shipping practices, while Mitchell Media has won numerous awards for investigative journalism and literary publishing. More importantly, I've discovered that the greatest victory isn't in crushing those who wronged you, but in building something so successful and meaningful that their former power over you becomes irrelevant. My relationship with my family remains complicated but manageable. We have occasional dinners and maintain civil communication, but they understand that the old dynamics will never return. I am no longer the dismissed daughter hoping for approval. I am a successful business leader who chooses when and how to engage with them. Eleanor has become one of my closest advisors and the grandmother figure I never had. Her wisdom and loyalty during the darkest period of my life created a bond that transcends traditional employee relationships. She now serves as Director of Family Affairs for my various foundations, ensuring that the next generation of Mitchell family members are raised with the values my grandfather truly cherished. Jessica eventually found stability working for a mid-sized logistics company in Portland, far from the San Francisco society that once celebrated her. We exchange holiday cards and occasionally speak on the phone, but the sister relationship we once had cannot be rebuilt. Too much trust was broken. Too much cruelty was revealed. The most meaningful development has been my writing career, which flourished alongside my business success. My memoir about the experience became an international bestseller, and I've published 2 novels exploring themes of family betrayal and personal transformation. The movie rights to my story were purchased by a major studio, with plans for a limited series that will bring this story to an even wider audience. The Elizabeth Mitchell Foundation has become my greatest source of pride. Over the past decade, we've provided grants and support to over 500 emerging writers, many of whom faced family opposition or financial barriers to pursuing their artistic dreams. One of our most successful grant recipients, Maria Santos, came from a family that wanted her to abandon her poetry to become an accountant. With foundation support, she published 3 collections that won national awards and now teaches creative writing at Stanford University. "You didn't just save my writing career," Maria told me at our annual gala. "You saved my sense of self-worth. My family tried to convince me that art was selfish and impractical. Your foundation showed me that creativity is valuable and worthy of support." These success stories validate everything my grandfather believed about supporting artistic talent regardless of family pressure or societal expectations. One outcome I hadn't anticipated was how my story would resonate with people facing similar family dynamics. My memoir and public speaking engagements attracted thousands of messages from individuals dealing with manipulation, favoritism, and emotional abuse within their own families. "Your story gave me the courage to pursue music despite my parents' objections," wrote one young man. "I realized that their disapproval said more about their limitations than mine. Reading about your experience helped me recognize the manipulation in my own family," another person shared. "I'm now in therapy working through years of gaslighting about my career choices." These responses made me understand that my family's betrayal, while devastating personally, had given me a platform to help others facing similar struggles. My grandfather's gift had rippled out beyond my own life to touch hundreds of people who needed validation that their dreams were worth pursuing. As I write this, I'm sitting in the office that once belonged to my grandfather, surrounded by maritime charts and business awards, but also by framed copies of my published articles and photos from foundation events. The space reflects both the business legacy I inherited and the creative legacy I've built. Mitchell Maritime continues to thrive under ethical leadership, proving that profitability and integrity aren't mutually exclusive. Mitchell Media has expanded into documentary filmmaking, and our most recent project about family wealth and power dynamics won an Emmy Award. The personal cost of my family's betrayal was enormous: years of self-doubt, financial struggle, and emotional pain that required extensive therapy to process. But the unexpected gift was discovering my own strength and capacity for leadership that I never would have explored without being forced to stand alone. I think about my grandfather often, especially when making difficult business decisions or supporting young writers through the foundation. His final act of love wasn't just leaving me money, it was giving me documented proof that I had been worthy of support all along, that the failures and rejections I had experienced weren't due to my inadequacy, but to deliberate sabotage by people who should have protected me. So now I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced favoritism in your family that made you question your own worth? Maybe you were the overlooked child while a sibling received all the attention and support? Or perhaps you faced family members who tried to sabotage your dreams because they didn't align with their expectations. What would you do if you discovered that family members had been working behind the scenes to undermine your success? Would you choose forgiveness or justice? Could you handle suddenly having power over people who had previously dismissed and controlled you? Have you ever had someone in your life who believed in your potential when everyone else saw only failure? Maybe a grandparent, teacher, or mentor who saw something in you that your immediate family missed. I'd love to hear about those relationships that helped you persevere through difficult times. And here's a question that really keeps me thinking. Do you believe that success is the best revenge, or is there something more important than proving wrong the people who doubted you? What does true victory look like when you've been betrayed by the people closest to you? If you've made it this far in my story, you're probably someone who understands complex family dynamics and the pain of feeling like an outsider in your own home. I want to know, what part of the story resonated most with you? Was it the discovery of the manipulation, the moment of inheritance revelation, or the business success that followed? For those of you who are currently struggling with family members who don't support your dreams, what questions do you have about finding your own path? How do you maintain confidence when the people who should believe in you are actively working against your success? And finally, for anyone who has built success despite family opposition, what advice would you give to others facing similar challenges? What would you tell your younger self about family dynamics and the importance of trusting your own instincts? Please share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. This community has become a place where people support each other through family challenges and celebrate unconventional paths to success. Your stories and insights help others realize they're not alone in their struggles. Don't forget to hit that like button if this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think differently about family relationships and personal worth. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming betrayal, building success against the odds, and finding your own definition of victory. Ring that notification bell so you never miss new content about family dynamics, business success, and personal transformation. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that their dreams are valid, regardless of family approval. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for someone is show them that they're not crazy for wanting something different, that their family's limitations don't have to become their own. Thank you for watching my journey from family scapegoat to business leader. Remember, your worth isn't determined by family expectations or conventional measures of success, but by your ability to stay true to your values while building something meaningful. The best revenge isn't just living well, it's becoming so successful that your former critics have to respect you, whether they want to or not. What's your story? I can't wait to read your comments and continue this conversation about family, success, and finding your own path in life.